Hi everyone, welcome back to i-TUTOR IAS Academy Tamilnadu History NCERT series. Today we are discussing chapter 7, that is Revenue Administration and Economic Policy of the British. Okay, so this is one of the important chapter after Governor General's reforms and all. So British revenue and economic policies, that is around 1757 to 1947 was the period of British time, and systematically it transformed India into a raw material exporter and a consumer of British goods, focusing on maximizing revenue through land tax system and zamindari, rayatwari, mahalwari system like that. And these policies caused deindustrialization, commercialization of agriculture, and massive wealth drain and devastating of famines. Okay, so this is basically happened in British revenue and economic policies in India. And key land revenue systems are permanent settlements in 1793. Introduced by Lord Cornwallis in Bengal, Bihar, and Odisha, and zamindars were made owners of the land with the fixed high revenue demand leading to exploitation of tenants. And next land revenue system was Rayatwari system 1820s, that is developed by Thomas Munro in Madras and Bombay presidencies, and revenue was settled directly with the cultivators, that is it called riots. Okay, so it's revenue settled directly with the cultivators called riots, ryots. That's why it's called Rayatwari system, and often at a 45% to 55% of the produce, leading to high peasant indebtedness. Mahalwari system 1822. It introduced northwestern provinces and Punjab by Holt Mackenzie, and the village, that is Mahal, village called Mahal. That's why Mahalwari system name, and was treated as a unit, and the village headman was responsible for payment, which was revised periodically. And economic policies and impacts are deindustrialization happened, the commercialization of agriculture and drain of wealth, a massive transfer of Indian resource revenue and profit to Britain without any equivalent return, as identified by Dadabhai Navroji. So that is drain of wealth. And impact on agrarian structure, high taxation, rigid collection, and the rise of money lenders due to the requirement to pay tax in cash, and led to widespread poverty, land alienation, and severe and frequent famines happened. So this is the impact on agrarian structure in India. And overall aim was never Indian welfare, but the financial enrichment of British East India Company under later the British Crown. After the mutiny, the British Crown directly involved in Indian administration and the policies. So that's what happened. And so we will discuss here one by one. And what is British agrarian policies? Uh, and in this chapter, we will discuss the British agrarian policy first of all, and different land revenue system introduced by the British, and the merits and demerits of the revenue administration, British policy towards the handicraft industry, and causes of the decline of the Indian crafts. This much we will discuss in this unit today. And it is well known fact that India is primarily an agrarian country, and the overwhelming majority of its people depend on agriculture for sustenance. And if the crop is good, prosperity prevails, otherwise it leads to famine and starvation. Until the 18th century, there was a strong relation between agriculture and cottage industries in India, and India was not only ahead in the field of agriculture than most other countries, but it also held a prominent place in the world in the field of handicraft production. And the British destroyed handicraft industry in the country while unleashing far-reaching changes in the country's agrarian structure by introducing new systems of land revenue, tenures, and policies of revenue administration. And India's national income, foreign trade, industrial expansion, and almost every other dominion of economic activity depended on the country's agriculture. And the British policies revolved around getting maximum income from land without caring much about Indian interest of the cultivators. And they abandoned the age-old system of revenue administration and adopted in their place a ruthless policy of revenue collection. And after their advent, the British principally adopted three type of land tenures, that is roughly 19% of the total area under the British rule, that is Bengal, Bihar, Banaras, division of the northwestern provinces and North Karnataka were brought under the zamindari system or the permanent settlement. Okay. And the second revenue system called the Mahalwari system was introduced in about 30% of the total area. In Samindari system, roughly 19%, and in the Mahalwari settlement, there is 30% of the total area under British rule in major part of the northwestern provinces, central provinces, and the Punjab with some variation. And next is Royadwari system. Okay, and in Royal Valley system covered about 51% of the area under British rule, comparing part of the Bombay and Madras presidencies, Assam, and certain other parts of British India. Okay, so this is the three systems under British policy. And next is permanent settlement. Lord Cornwallis' most conspicuous administration measure was permanent land revenue settlement of Bengal, which was extended to the provinces of Bihar and Orissa. And it is appropriate to recall that Warren Hastings introduced the annual lease system of auction the land to the highest border. We already discussed in Lord Cornwallis chapter. It creates chaos in the revenue administration, and Cornwallis at the time of his appointment, was instructed by the director to find a satisfactory and permanent solution to the problem of the land revenue system in order to protect the interest of both the company and the cultivators. And it obliged the Governor General to make a thorough inquiry into the usage and tenures and rent prevalent in Bengal. The whole problem occupied Lord Cornwallis for over 3 years, and after a prolonged discussion with his colleagues like Sir John Shore and James Grant, he decided to abolish the annual lease system and introduced a decennial, that is 10-year settlement, which was subsequently declared to be continuous. And the main features of the permanent settlement was, first one, the Samindas of Bengal were recognized as the owners of land as long as they paid the revenue to the East India Company regularly, and the amount of revenue that the Samindas had to pay to the company was firmly fixed and would not be raised under any circumstances. In other words, the government of East India Company got 89%, leaving the rest to the Samindas. And the ryots became tenants since they were considered the tillers of the soil. And this settlement took away the administrative and judicial function of Zamindas. Okay, so these are the main features of permanent settlement. And the permanent settlement of Cornwallis was bitterly criticized on the point that it was adopted with undue haste, and the flagrant defect of this arrangement was that no attempt was made ever either to survey the lands or assess their value. And the assessment was made roughly on the basis of accounts of previous collection, and it was done in an irregular manner. And the effect of system both on zamindars and ryots were disastrous, and as the revenue fixed by the system was too high, many zamindars default on payment and their property was seized, and distress sales were conducted, leading to their ruin. And the rich zamindars who led luxurious lives left their village and migrated into town, and they entrusted their recent collection to agent who exacted all kind of illegal taxes besides the legal one from the riots. And this had resulted in a great deal of misery amongst the peasants and farmers, and therefore Lord Cornwallis' idea of building system of benevolent landlordism failed. And Baden Powell remarks the zamindars as a class did nothing for the tenants. And though initially the company gained financially, in the long run, and the company suffered financial loss because land productivity was high and income from it was meagre, since it was a fixed sum. And it should be noted that in the pre-British period, a share on the crop was fixed as land tax. And nevertheless, this system proved to be a great boon to the zamindars and to the government of Bengal, and it formed a regular income and stabilized the government of the company. And the zamindars proposed at the cost of the welfare of the tenants. Okay, so that's about permanent settlement under Lord Cornwallis. Okay, next is Roydwari settlement. The Roydwari settlement was introduced mainly in Madras, Berar, Bombay, and Assam. Sir Thomas Munro introduced this system in the Madras presidency. Under this settlement, the peasant was recognized as the proprietor of land. Okay, and there was no intermediary like zamindar between the peasant and the government. So long as he paid the revenue in time, the peasant was not evicted from the land. Besides, the land revenue was fixed for a period of 20 to 40 years, such a long period, and every peasant was held personally responsible for direct payment of land revenue to the government. However, in the end, this system also failed. Okay, so Rohitbari system also failed. Under this settlement, it was certainly not possible to collect revenue in a systematic manner. So that's the main reason. And the revenue official indulged in harsh measures for non-payment or delayed payments. So that's why the Rohitbari settlement failed. And next, Mahalwari settlement. In 1833, the Mahalwari settlement was introduced in the Punjab, the central provinces, and part of northwestern provinces. And under this system, the basic unit of revenue settlement was the village or the mahal. And as the village lands belong jointly to the village community, the responsibility of paying the revenues rested with the entire mahal or the village community. So the entire land of the village was measured at the time of fixing the revenue. And though the Mahalwari system eliminated middlemen between the government and the village community and brought about improvement in irrigation facility, yet its benefit was largely enjoyed by the government. And British policy towards Indian handicraft. Okay, and the European companies began arriving on the Indian soil from 16th century, and during this period they were constantly engaged in fierce competition to establish their supremacy and monopoly over Indian trade. So not surprisingly, therefore, initial objective of East India Company was to have flourishing trade with India, and later this objective was enlarged and acquire a monopoly over this trade and obtain its entire profit. And although the trade monopoly thus acquired by the company in India was ended by the Charter Act of 1833, the British policy of exploiting the resource of India continued unabated. And in this respect, the nature of British rule was different from the earlier rule. And as far as the traditional handicraft industry and the production of object of art were concerned, India was already far ahead of other countries in the world, and the textile industries were the most important among the Indian industry. Cotton, silk, woolen product were sought after all over the world, and particularly the muslin of Decca and carpet of Lahore, shawls of Kashmir, and embroidery work of Benares were very famous. Ivory goods, woodworks, and jewelry were other widely sought after Indian commodities. And apart from Deccan, which was highly famous for its muslins, and the other important center of textile production were Krishnanagar, Chanderi, Adni, and Benares. And dhotis and dupattas of Ahmedabad, chikan of Lucknow, and silk borders of Nagpur had earned a worldwide fame. For their silk products, some small towns of Bengal beside Malda and Murshidabad were very famous, and similarly Kashmir, Punjab, Western Rajasthan were famous for their woolen garments. And besides textiles, India was also known widely for its shipping, leather and metal industries, and Indian fame as an industry economy rested on cutting and polishing of marble and other precious stone and carving of ivory and sandalwood. And Moradabad and Banaras were famous for brass, copper, bronze utensils, and Nasik, Pune, Hyderabad, and Tanjore were famous for other metalworks also. Okay, and Kutch, Sindh, and Punjab were known for manufacturing arms, and Kolhapur, Satara, Gorakhpur, Agra, Chittor, and Palgad had likewise earned a reputation for their glass industries. And making of gold, silver, and diamond jewelry was another important industry activity in which many places in India specialized. Okay, you just note down this, these areas for your map study. Okay, and these entire handicraft industries indicate a vibrant economy in India. And despite enjoying such fame in the world, the Indian handicraft industry had begun to decline by the beginning of the 18th century. And there were many reasons for it. And the first, the policy followed by the East India Company proved to be highly detrimental to the Indian handicraft industry, and the Indian market was flooded with the cheap finished goods from Britain, and it resulted a steep decline in the sales of Indian products both with the outside of the country. And in 1769, the company encouraged the cultivation of raw silk in Bengal while imposing service restrictions on the sale of its finished products. And in 1830, the strategies were devised by the company to enhance the consumption of finished goods from Britain. And in this respect, the tariff and octroi policies were suitably modified to suit the British commercial interest. And the cite an example, in 1835, only a minimal import of British duty of 2.5% was imposed on the other of British manufacturing cotton clothes, whereas very high 15% export duty was charged on Indian cotton textile as per the new maritime regulation. Okay, so that's an example. And moreover, the goods from England could only be brought by English cargo ships. As a result of all these policies, the Indian textile could not enter the British market, whereas the Indian market was flooded with the British goods. And thus, with the rise of British paramountcy in India, the process of decline in the power and status of Indian rulers had set in, and thus the demand for the domestic luxury goods like royal attires, armory, and objects of art by the drastically. And so, with the disappearance of the traditional dynasties, their nobility also passed into oblivion, and this led to a sharp decline in the demand for traditional luxury goods. And besides, the industrial revolution led to the invention of new machinery in Europe, and power looms replaced hand looms. And in India, also, the advent of machines led to the decline of handicraft, as now the machine made products were available at a cheaper rate and more goods could be produced in much lesser time. Okay, finally, the new communication and transport facilities brought about the revolution in public life. And earlier, goods used to be transported either by bullock cart and or by ships. Thus, during the rainy season, it was not always convenient to carry on the normal transportation, but now conditions were changed with the introduction of railways. In Dalhousie's time, railways are introduced, and technology, changed that time, and railway and steamer services and concrete road were laid to connect the country's agricultural hinterland. And the import of goods from England also increased with this stimulation increased in export of raw material from India, and leading to massive loss of job among Indian artisans and craftsmen who lost their only mean to livelihood. So this is about the economic policies and revenue administration of British. And so far we discussed objects or objectives of the British agrarian policy, and the permanent settlement, Royatwari settlements system, and Mahalwari system of land revenue. and the economic impact of British Land Revenue Administration and the Indian handicraft industry and its importance, British policy of exploitation and the decline of Indian handicraft and industry due to the Industrial Revolution in England. So we discussed in this chapter. In between any doubts, you can contact us anytime. For more content, do like, share and subscribe our channel. Thank you so much.